Well, it does not appear that the Switch 2 rumor mill is slowing down, and that's kind of expected. In fact, it should continue to pick up as we go along here, considering we're thinking Nintendo is going to at least start talking after we get into 2024. But there is one thing that's really started to make the rounds over the last 24 hours, and it has to do with, yes, Nintendo's next system, but price points, release dates, multiple SKUs. There was a lot of stuff getting thrown around, and while some of it you can kind of believe, other parts of it just sound downright weird, and I wanted to go over some of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel. So let's take a look here. This really the discussion around this, rumors and stuff, started to reach all kinds of different outlets online, like My Nintendo News, for example, who said that rumor claims Switch 2 is coming in 2 models priced at $400 or more next September. So they were pulling this from WCCF Tech, and apparently the person who had disclosed some of this information on Discord was also someone who had previously provided information and screenshots of Team Ninja's Rise of the Ronin on the Snitches server. So I guess because they have the Snitches name is involved with it, there is a bit more, I guess, backing for some of these outlets to kind of point to this source. But we can take a look at some of the different messages that they dropped on Discord, as well as one update that continues to kind of muddy up the water a bit. Now, this comes from Soldier Delta. And they decided to talk a bit about some Switch 2 information they had gotten from an anonymous source. So, of course, grain of salt and all of that. But they say the Switch 2 has an intended release in September 2024. However, there's also a placeholder for early November. The internal name is NG. However, we don't know about the final name. There are 2 intended models, one being a standard one for $449 with a digital option for $400. Now, they go on again with an update saying, it's a rumor that I heard, you know the drill. So there's a few clarifications with the rumors. First off is the NG code name, of which I've been told is not a code name from Nintendo, and rather like a code name given to developers. Small miscommunication there. Well, technically, we already know about that because NG Switch was mentioned by Activision in that email from December 2022, when apparently they had a meeting with President Furukawa at the time, I guess talking about getting some of their games onto the newer hardware, kind of giving a briefing as to what to expect from it, and maybe even how they can get their hands on a development kit, that sort of thing, right? So NG is not new to really any of us and could easily have been pulled just from that information, that story that we got there. However, they say they're reaffirmed about the details of the SKU. However, they mentioned that the price point is still subject to change in case anything happens. The release date was also reaffirmed with a target for the 24th of September next year, but I was also told that the November fallback release date is the 3rd of November in case something goes wrong. So those dates, one's a Tuesday and one's a Sunday. And I don't expect Nintendo to launch a brand new system on a Tuesday or a Sunday. Typically, it'd be Friday. That's when the Switch Now was released in 2017, March 3rd. So, yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense there. In fact, I wouldn't take anything seriously when it comes to pointing out an exact date, because I have a strong feeling Nintendo probably doesn't even know the exact date the thing's coming out on. Sure, they can have target times and dates set up in their mind, but most likely they're probably painting this in the picture of quarters, because it's a lot easier to shift from one quarter to the next and be like, it's not coming out this next quarter, whether that's fiscal year quarter timetable or calendar year. To me, that's probably how they would have it set up internally, rather than try to hone in on an exact week or date. That to me just sounds like speculation on the part of whoever is providing this information there. So I wouldn't take that one very seriously. The SKU situation is interesting, calling for multiple SKUs that are not simply just storage differences. We're actually getting into the realm of Nintendo producing an all-digital system at launch. I do believe we will eventually see an all-digital system from Nintendo, but I don't think it would be at the start of this generation, or next generation, which would be, I believe, still holiday 2024. Seems too soon for them to be doing that, considering they're still very, very strong in multiple markets when it comes to the physical sales. Okay. In fact, we can actually take a look at some data on that here soon. But I feel like at the time of launch, Nintendo would be much better off sticking with one SKU. I know I've talked about the idea of them having a cheaper SKU or stock keeping unit and then a more expensive one. So you'd have one that comes out with lower storage and then the LCD screen, that sort of thing. Then you have a more premium model at launch that has an OLED display, more storage, all these different things, right? But I feel like at that time, you can kind of complicate the situation. And the thing that Nintendo did very well when the Switch first came out was just keep it simple and straightforward. There's one system, it's $300, and then over the course of the generation, we will introduce new SKUs. And in fact, it's a good way, and it was shown to be a good way, for Nintendo to keep momentum for the platform without the need to basically reinvent the wheel and introduce a Pro system. I would have liked to have seen a Pro system because I'm still up in the air on the backwards compatibility thing, and I would hate for some of these games to be stuck on the current Switch that has a hard time just running some of these games. And it would be nice if we had a Pro model, if there is no backwards compatibility, to run these games at better or acceptable frame rates, resolutions, that sort of things. So now I'm basically thinking this next one better have backwards compatibility, and I would hope that it's able to unlock some of the performance from these older games. But nonetheless, Nintendo proved that by going through and refining the Tegra X1 technically, and I feel like that they just kind of fell into by default because NVIDIA moved that process to 16 nanometers. Nintendo just ended up being there like, well, okay, I guess we'll do this, and we'll also improve the security around the chip, and it'll just get better battery life. Great, here's the red box Switch. Still the same price. We're going to discontinue that old one where you just needed a paper clip to open it up. You don't have to worry about that anymore. We're just going to go with this new one. And then eventually we got the Switch Lite, the OLED model, all of that, right? So they were able to still introduce different variations without having to introduce a brand new chip into the process, and of course making it a bit more complicated or more things to account for from the developer side. This probably still wouldn't have done that anyway because it would simply be, okay, one will take a cartridge and one won't, but I still think you're just presenting more options than are necessary when it comes to the customer side. Now, that's not to say that 4 years, 5 years into the generation, okay, here's an NG Switch that has no cartridge slot. I think that's very possible, and it wouldn't shock me if it did happen. Otherwise, maybe Nintendo will wait until, what we think, 2032 for their next system to come out after the one that's not out yet, to basically just have an all-digital system, because most likely the way we're trending, Sony and Microsoft will have probably left the physical market behind, and, well, then most of the mainstream will have probably just completely adopted digital. This was some good information that was highlighted here by Genki over on Twitter, discussing the split between physical and digital sales in Japan, which we know is, I mean, really Nintendo's dominant market. Typically, it's all Nintendo stuff in the top 10, barring a couple of outlier weeks. And in this case, it's still 77% in favor of physical sales in Japan. So it seems odd that Nintendo would then be like, nope, we're going all digital to start this generation. I think they still need the needle to move a bit more in favor of digital, and it would probably have to completely overtake physical, maybe like a 70-30 split or something in Japan before they make that big move over. I still think in the US, it probably favors physical and most likely just worldwide. So yeah, I don't think Nintendo is necessarily thinking, oh, we have to cut out these cartridges or our place in retail stores, because they're still controlling the market there. In fact, as I've talked to more and more people about this next generation system from Nintendo, I do wonder if that digital SKU that has come up before, I feel like it was discussed by Nick at Xbox Era. I feel like one other place. I almost wonder if that's kind of like a red herring leak or just one thrown out there to see who picks it up. I don't know. It just, the digital SKU doesn't make sense for Nintendo right this second. It would feel almost forced on their side. So that's something I look more towards, like 2030 to start hearing about something like that. Not to say they couldn't be working on it and it just doesn't come out, but for coming to market, I think we're still a ways off there. There is one other thing I wanted to point out here, and it comes back to the gimmick or the wrinkle that Nintendo would include with this next generation device, where they say their source reaffirmed the existence of AR features, augmented reality, and that it doesn't seem to have an OLED screen. So the LCD screen, that has been pretty much confirmed at this point. Nate's discussed it, and I believe VGC and others. So it does seem like they're going back to LCD, which technically leaves room for them to reintroduce the OLED display down the road when it's time to do a refresh of the system, like the Switch OLED, in order to keep that momentum going. But in this case, the wrinkle that I think Nintendo is going to go with, and it's something I keep looking around, keep talking to people, trying to get something about this what they would introduce to make it feel different, because that to me is one of the most compelling parts about this whole situation. That and the controller aspect. The controller thing could be kind of interesting with the Joy-Cons. What do they go to from there? But I kind of believe the wrinkle is going to be very subtle, as in, I think they're just going to make a better Switch. And for some people, that's probably a relief. Others might be kind of disappointed, hoping for some crazy, wacky idea from Nintendo. I think the idea of an augmented reality setup to go along with cameras that they introduce to the next system, that might be the big gimmick. Really, that seriously might be it. And I'd be completely fine with that, because that's kind of all I want, is just a better Switch at this point. The hybrid model has been proven to me. And the interesting thing about all of this is, technically, because Nintendo has been behind the curve when it comes to the fidelity, the graphics side of things, the technology side. I mean, really, if you think about it, going from the current Switch up to a new Tegra chip from NVIDIA that adds HDR, the 4K upscaling with DLSS, that sort of thing, that would feel next-gen enough for a lot of people. So Nintendo can still kind of take advantage of that, whereas it's harder for Sony or Microsoft, considering they had a PS4 Pro and an Xbox One X that already shipped with 4K on the box. It is harder to tell the difference as we go along here with these generations between those systems and the current ones when it comes to graphical fidelity. In this case, though, Nintendo is showing up with 4K 30 or 4K 60, even upscaled, with their art styles, could look legitimately next gen compared to what we had with the Switch. Oh, and as for the price point, $449 and $400, I kind of feel like Nintendo's magic number right now for the price is $399. $449 sounds a bit weird. However, they are technically selling an OLED Switch for $349, which also sounds like kind of a weird price point. But I think $399 is the sweet spot for them, and that's something they will attempt to hit, because with the Switch, $299 was actually a really good price, and there were many developers who even said I was surprised with how much came in the box for the price. So that was another strength that I'm sure Nintendo realized, and trying to basically reenact the Switch's launch with that kind of success, it would make sense to also go for a price point that people will see as being very good and having a lot of value behind it. So I feel like looking at this overall rumor and stuff that's going around right now, whenever I see a lot of information get thrown into one spot from a single source, I do tend to err on the side of questioning it more than anything else. And I think there's some stuff in here that's definitely eyebrow raising when it comes to the price point, the dates, that sort of thing, the SKUs, the all digital side. It's a lot of question marks with those ones that I wouldn't necessarily go all in on. I'd take it with a whole bag of salt then. But the idea of Nintendo maybe sticking closer to the hybrid model and just working to improve what's already there with a little wrinkle of maybe augmented reality, I think is the best course of action, and that's actually kind of what I'm hoping for. Oh, and also improve the Joy-Cons. That's obviously a big one too. But let me know what you guys think about this down below. The idea of multiple SKUs and all digital NG Switch, does that make sense to you to launch maybe holiday of 2024? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.